Hey, how's it going there, peeps? Phil here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here, bringing you another deck tech. This is a different one I've got. It's an ultimate win condition. It's a black-blue. It's still reasonably still in rotation. It could probably still work with a couple cards taken out with rotation happening around September, but let me know what you think. This is going to be to the hard way. It's a treasured victory. Enjoy the brew.
Treasured victory.
Okay, peeps, let's kick this off. As I spoke of in the introduction, we are doing to the hard way. So we've got two ultimate win condition cards that work coinciding with each other that help each other out to get to their ultimate goal. And those two cards are 4 copies of Revel in Riches and 4 copies of Mechanized Productions. Both these cards are in mid-range cost, so Revel in Riches is 1 black and 4 others. Whenever a creature our opponent controls dies, we can create a treasure token. Okay, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasure tokens, you win the game. Mechanized Production is a little bit cheaper to cost. It's a double blue with 2 others, so it costs 4. It's an aura, so we want to enchant an artifact we control, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, we create a token that's a copy of the enchanted artifact. And if we control 8 or more artifacts of the same or another, then we win the game. The first card I actually want to use with this combination of Revel in Riches and Mechanized Productions is 4 copies of Gleaming Barrier. Now, Gleaming Barrier is a 0/4 wall. It's going to defend. That's pretty much all it's going to do. We're going to stall our opponents. It costs 2 to cast, so we don't have to worry about our color spreads. And when it dies, it creates a treasure. Bonus, Mechanized Productions, the Gleaming Barrier, create more barriers, wall up, they die, we get treasures, ultimate win. Even with multiples of the Gleaming Barriers in play triggered by the Mechanized Productions, being board wiped is going to help us because we're going to have multiple treasures being sent back to us, which is going to help us again with our Revel in Riches ultimate win condition. Okay, so let's move on now to our 3 drops. And in turn 3, we're likely to play our first of 4 copies of Vanquish the Weak. Now, Vanquish the Weak is at instant speed. It's 2 and 1 black. Destroy target creature with the power 3 or less. So this is going to help us trigger Revel in Riches as well if we have one of those in play. But really important in the early game, we start removing these creatures. Once we've removed that first creature and we have a Mechanized Production to cast, we can put it straight onto that artifact. And then every upkeep we're going to double. But this is just the start of where it can go. And this is just an example. So it's not exactly where we want to be doing that in the first place sometimes. It might be just a strategy we can angle in. Keeping with the curve, we want to start with 4 copies of Hornswoggle. Hornswoggle's 1 blue, 2 others, instant speed, counter target creature spell, you create a treasure token. Boom. Fantastic, isn't it? Counter creatures that our opponent's trying to cast, we still get a treasure, so we're going more towards that ultimate win condition. Hornswoggle, however, does not trigger Revel in Riches, so we don't get that extra treasure, but we are removing a creature that's not come into play, so it hasn't even made it into the battlefield, which is going to help us. And the last of our 3 drop curves is 4 copies of Supreme Will. Now, I love Supreme Will. It has 2 abilities. The first ability being counter target spell unless the controller plays an additional 3, so it's good in the early game as well. And if it's late game and it's not really going to work, it does serve its an additional purpose by looking at the top 4 cards of your library and putting one of them into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. So this is going to be helpful, and we do have cards in this deck that's going to help us shuffle everything around so we don't have to worry about cards that are going to be cycled to the bottom. Using the second ability of Supreme Will, digging for the cards we want, the likeliness of the cards we want is to get that early removal in our hands and potentially other removals. So we want to cycle things that we don't need immediately. We want to slowly build up those treasures, and we can even play the Revel in Riches and the Mechanized Productions later in the game, holding cards, making our opponent think that we're a black-blue control deck. Of course, this is going to work perfectly in the first game. In the second game, we've got another win condition that we might not need to pull out. But either or, it's going to work great. Now, our 4 drops, we're going to go with 2 copies of Ravenous Chupacabra. Now, the thing I love about Ravenous Chupacabra is that it enters the battlefield trigger is beautiful for this deck. Destroying one of your opponent's creatures and putting a body on the field, stalling once again so we can get to our ultimate win condition. Now the Chupacabra does cost 2 black and 2 others, and it is only a 2/2 creature, but what's better than having a body on the board and being able to remove a creature for 4? Chups will actually trigger Revel in Riches as well, so that's going to help us when we remove a creature and we end up getting another treasure token towards the ultimate goal. Okay, time to make things a little bit more real. As we know that Revel in Riches is a 5-drop, Mechanized Productions is a 4-drop, so we know that it's going to be at least turn 7 or 8 before we can win the game. So stalling is a major part of this game. Now what we've had earlier, that we've looked at all these creatures and removals that is basically going to get us to that stage. And the beauty of having Revel in Riches and Mechanized Productions in your hand and not playing them early is to let people know, or at least think, that you are a black-blue control deck. And being a black-blue control deck means that we're likely to have more counters and more removal in our hands. And they don't know what our win condition is yet. Speaking of 5-drops that are going to help us get to our ultimate win condition, we're going to go with 4 copies of Contract Killing. Now, Contract Killing is a double black and 3 others at sorcery speed. However, it does destroy target creature and creates 2 treasure tokens for us. So if we've got a Revel in Riches in play, we destroy an opponent's creatures, it's creating 3 treasures for us. Speaking of 5-drops, we're going to go with our last piece of removal, and that is 4 copies of Spell Swindle. Once again, double blue, 3 others at instant speed, so it's a 5-drop. However, it counters target spell, creating X colorless treasure tokens, where X is equal to the converted mana cost of the spell countered. This is going to be good for us. We can counter something big, something small, it doesn't matter. It all contributes to the ultimate win condition with the Revel in Riches. In testing, this deck tends to win between turn 8 to 10. Once we've got that 5 mana, the deck really starts to turn the screws and put the pressure back on your opponent, where they might start getting an inkling about what your win condition could be. Now, here is the bonus that I've thrown in, throw your opponents completely off and put them in the back foot, is they all think that you're going to be getting this ultimate win condition and they're going to try and put everything out on the field, right? But what they don't know is that you're holding 4 copies of Torment of Hellfire. Now the beauty of this is that we've amassed at least 5 to 8 land at this point. We've probably got about 8 or 9 treasures, and we're going to sink it all into the Torment of Hellfire, and we're going to throw it straight back in their face. Now they're likely to have only a couple cards in their hand and maybe 5 creatures on the board, if that. But you know, we've just slammed them for around about 16 mana, so they're going to have to do 14 points of removal somehow. So they're going to have to remove all their creatures once again, sacrificing them, triggering Revel in Riches, and creating the treasures. We double up on those Revel in Riches, we double up on those treasure tokens. Same with the Mechanized Productions. If we leave one Mechanized Production and don't sacrifice them all, we don't sacrifice the one that has the Mechanized Production on. You know, there's nothing wrong with this. And they have to discard cards, and if they can't, they'll be taking 3 damage for each X we've cast. Well, that's pretty much it. These 3 cards are to help us with our ultimate win condition. We don't have the creatures in there to win the game. We don't have any other way. So we've got to make sure we play and stick to the plan. We use the Revel in Riches, the Mechanized Productions smartly, and we hold our Torments of Hellfire until the last moment, because it's all it's going to take is for them to be pumped into their attack. They're going to be forming their line to try and swing in. We're going to let them know that they can't do that. And you know, you never know. We could be holding 2 Torments, and then you play the first one, you smash out all of their hand, you smash out all of their creatures. They're probably taking around about 9 to 12 damage due to the amount of mana we've sunk into this Torment. And then we just play another one with the additional 8 mana that we've probably already got on the battlefield. It's pretty simple really, but it's a beautiful combination. Well, that's pretty much it from the deck, so let's start moving into the lands. Now, to help out with our mana spread, I've decided that we're going to go with 4 copies of Evolving Wilds. We're going to go with 8 islands, 8 swamps, 4 copies of Drowned Catacombs, so we make sure that we're getting a good even mana spread. The Evolving Wilds are in there to help us get to those double colors, so if we start drawing into cards like Torment, Contract Killing, Mechanized Productions, we're going to make sure that we're getting those land drops perfectly every time. Well, I guess there's not much else left to do except for moving on to our man bag. And in this beautiful piece of work, I want to try and synergize stuff that's going to give us more treasures, more removal, and really make sure that we refine the combinations of the deck rather than trying to beat ultimate combinations that are out there. Now, the first cards we could potentially use in our sideboard, or at least what I'll choose to do, is to have 2 more Choops. Now, Chupacabra is great because it is a cheaper option than Contract Killing, and it gives us a body on the board. So you could, if you really wanted to, replace the Contract Killings and get yourself a creature on the board and removal. You will, however, probably only get a treasure in play if you have a Revel in Riches. So it kind of, you got to weigh it up whether or not it's going to be worth it. I don't mind having vanilla creatures in the deck, and adding some in can help putting a board staple on and getting us to our ultimate goal as well. And that card would be 4 copies of Dire Fleet Hoarder. It's a 2-drop, it's 1 black, 1 other, 2/1 human pirate. With Dire Fleet Hoarder dies, you can create a treasure. So it's gonna work in a way where we can put something on the board, it blocks, it does help us get 1 treasure towards our goal if we have Revel in Riches. Keeping a low curve is important, so that is where the Dire Fleet Hoarder can help us. That low curve helping us ramp into the higher cards that can potentially help us. So you could replace the Gleaming Barriers, I guess, so you can guarantee to get it, but then you lose that defensive ability. You could replace the Supreme Wills, probably wouldn't replace the Hornswoggles though. The next creature I'd like to see in our sideboard that's going to synergize with our deck is going to be 4 copies, Pitil's Plunderer. Now, it's a 3-drop, it's 1 black, 3 others, it's 1/4, it's a pirate. His ability is whenever another creature we control dies, we create a treasure token. So it works really well with the Gleaming Barrier and also the Dire Fleet Hoarder. So if we have the 3 creatures, and we could probably end up stapling a board full of creatures instead of removal spells, it is going to start triggering and doubling up on things. However, that does require keeping things on the board, and sometimes I find that at 4 drops we just have creatures that are bigger than power of 4, and we tend to have a lot more removal around at this point. And I'm sure that our opponent would actually probably, have stacks of removal in his hand at this point because we haven't been casting. I'm trying to keep the sideboard really simple by going with 10 creatures that are going to synergize with the deck and 5 spells that are going to synergize with the deck. And the first of the 5 spells that I'm going to be using is 2 copies of Vraana's Hunger. It's an instant speed, it's 2 and 1 black. It has Ascend. Each opponent sacrifices a creature if you have the city's blessing. Instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls rounded up. So if we have Ascend, which we likely will with the amount of treasures we have, land, as well as the Mechanized Productions and Revel in Riches, we are going to be able to make our opponents sacrifice half their creatures rounded up. Early game, this isn't very good. That is why it's not in the deck. I've just gone for straight removal. I've gone for definitive removal, even though it is at a higher cost. But the bonus to Vraana's Hunger is that if it is ascended and we remove half of our opponent's creatures, which generally tends to be 3 to 4 or more depending on board stakes at the time we play it, means that we will get those additional treasures into our Revel in Riches. Okay, so the last of the 3 spells I'm going with is going to be Bontu's Last Reckoning. It's a double black, 1 other, sorcery speed, destroy all creatures. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap phase. Now this is fine. At a point where we have so many treasures in play, we can just sack 3 treasures to destroy all of our opponent's creatures. The upside to this, we don't even need to tap any of our lands. We just don't need to. We just tap 3 treasures, we destroy their creatures, and we replace the treasures that we've just used. We'll probably end up with more depending on what the board stakes are. And that is the beauty of this deck. So we're trying to destroy and replenish. Replenishing all the time until we get to our ultimate win condition, which is going to be 10 treasures or 8 artifacts. Well, that's it for me here at MTG Kiwi Philosophy. I'm Phil. I hope you've enjoyed the deck tech. Please like it, subscribe, share. You know what I'm like. Do what you want. I'll catch you on the flip side. Ciao.